Welcome back to episode 65 of the Grappling Growth podcast with me, Joe Testouri. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of welcoming on Nicole Parker-Beggs. She's the founder of Meraki Consulting. And for those of you who don't know what Meraki means, it's a Greek word, which I won't spoil for you because she does a fantastic way of explaining what it means in the podcast. We talk about her favorite books. She is massively into business and economics, so it was a fantastic conversation for me. She mentions one of her favorite books, Money, a Love Story, which I have on my reading list now. We talk about SuperFreakonomics, one of the probably coolest, interesting economics books out there. And she actually educated me that there's a podcast called the Freakonomics Podcast, which I now have on my Spotify playlist. So thank you so much, Nicole. Not only that, but we talk about how AI is shaping the landscape of business and consulting. So give this a listen if you're someone who wants to learn a bit more about artificial intelligence, economics, and just essentially being a person that's more rooted to themselves. Enjoy. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testouri, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Welcome to the pod. How are you doing?
Oh, Joe, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm amazing, thank you. Nicole, I'm very curious to hear, what does growth look like to you?
Ooh, that is a great question. So growth to me is not linear, right? It's expansion and contraction. So it's iterating, right? Expanding, trying new things, testing, failing, learning, and then reiterating. So contracting back in, really working with my team, with other thought leaders and collabs, and going, okay, how do we improve this? How do we make it better? What are we hearing? What's needed right now? What do we feel best supports our clients and just humanity in general? And so it's just that constant, expand, contract, and over time, just growing and spreading.
Mm-hmm. I think your school of thought drifts away from the quite conventional approach of how I see it at times is 1% better day by day. And as you said, a linear approach. But as you said, it's a case of expanding and contracting at the same time. And nothing in this world is perfectly linear. And sometimes we go to bed feeling awful and we wake up feeling great. And equally, we go to bed feeling awful. And then our body expands and contracts and balances so that there's this steady plateau of equilibrium, so to speak. You mentioned just before we came on, and I was fascinated by it, but I didn't want to delve in too much, the name of your business. Could you tell us a little bit more about the origin story to the name and what it means for the listeners?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So the name is Meraki, and Meraki in the Greek tradition of the word. So in the Greek tradition, it's about the heart, the soul, and the passion that you put into everything you do. And so that is the foundation, our guiding principle, our North Star at Meraki. So that is all the touch points with clients, with one another, with communications, internal and external, right? We seek to take everything and give everything rooted in love and looking out for the best interests of every party. So win-win, right? All around.
And when you look at the origin of the word Meraki, what inspired you to name the business that from the get-go? Is there something that happened in life, or was there something that was there that you said to yourself maybe at the age of 17, if I ever run a business, I'm going to call it Meraki?
Oh my gosh, great question. Yeah, so I was an undergrad. My first degree is international business, and I saw the business world as being very cold and calculated and pushy and not really serving a greater good so much. And of course, this was many, many years ago. I won't even say how many years ago, but many, many moons and many years, early 90s. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to build an organization that inspired other organizations to really think holistically about whether it's a product or a service, right? How do we create it? How do we adapt it and change it? How do we deliver it from the initial idea all the way till the end of its life cycle in such a way that every single point, right? And so for product development, what do you do with clothing, right? After it has holes or it's worn out, do you recycle it? Do you throw it in the landfill? Do you repurpose it? So thinking about those things from, when this service ends and there's a new service that needs to begin, will we be ready for what our clients need next? Or will we be able to partner with someone and go, hey, this isn't our specialty, but it is for this company and this organization. And we've worked with them, we've vetted them, and we feel really good handing you off for this section of your business or this part of your journey. So that's kind of how we think about things.
Mm-hmm. And I know from looking at your website and the brand, you're very solution and problem centric. So it's looking at, as what you said, it's once the cycle of your partnership may have come to an end, that you look at, hey, we've got this partner who we respect and we trust. But equally, a lot of what you talk about is simplification, looking at business development and putting people first. Where do you think? And I had a really good podcast earlier today, actually, talking about DEI. Where do you think the landscape of people within companies is at right now, in the sense of how people are being treated and how it's looked at with regards to behaviors in workplaces and leadership?
Ooh, that is such a good question. How much time do we have?
We've got the next day.
Right. So we could do so many. I think we could teach a college course on this. Right now we're seeing the baby boomers, right? The older generation that kind of built the legacy companies that we see are retiring. They're ready to transition into something else. And we have a much smaller workforce coming in that doesn't have the knowledge base, right? So it feels chaotic almost. And I see this, in organizations, regardless of industry, where it's kind of like there's the old way of thinking and this is how we've always done it, versus being challenged by new people coming in and what they consider work-life balance, or communication styles and acceptable behaviors. And so there's this, it's almost like a reckoning, where everyone is kind of taking their position and going, this is what I stand for, this is what I want, this is what I need, versus, well, this is the company, this is our values, this is how we do things. And I always invite people to, let's come to center. Like, let's cherry pick, because we can. Nothing is set in stone that we have to do it any one way. And this goes for roles, right? Traditional roles. And so I always challenge people, like, let's build a hybrid role. Your marketing and PR person doesn't have to be the same marketing PR person from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It can be so much more. And we don't have to silo people. We can cross-train, we can collaborate, we can really open communications, we can get that diversity of thought, of experience, right? Of perspective, and bring all of that to the table and really make something profound.
The point you made there, I think, leans into a lot of innovation that Google have come up with. If you look at Gmail, for example, that they have an innovation initiative throughout the company, and people would essentially just throw mud at the wall and say, hey, we've got this idea. What if we were to start an email server and call it Gmail, and then do so and pin this together? And I think when you take people and you move them from their box, someone isn't just an accountant, because that person, when they go home, they're a mother or a father, and they see so many different lenses. They see the challenges of, okay, we go to the supermarket and we want to buy product A, but actually it doesn't have this filter in. And I think if you can create that environment and that platform where, again, we said put people first, then it's not just a case of, well, this is your job and you need to do this for the next 40 years. There's so many adaptations and transformations that are coming to fruition. Are you familiar with the concept of creative destruction?
Creating the structure.
Creative destruction.
Oh, creative destruction. Yes. Tearing it down and gutting it to look at its parts. And I love that.
Exactly. And it's just the continuous innovation. And I think where I see a lot of people being fearful of artificial intelligence and technology is that AI is coming to replace our jobs. But if you look at, I think farming is one of the best examples. farming 100 years ago, you might have had to have 50 men in a field to pick potatoes, as an example. And along came the tractor, probably a bit sooner than 100 years ago. But along came the tractor, and that replaced 45 jobs, and there's only 5 people left. So where did those 45 people go to? They went to higher valued, higher skilled jobs. Maybe they focus more on their education instead of taking young boys and girls out of school and education systems at the age of 11 or 12. Maybe that meant that we set the baseline of everyone has to study until 16, and we know that development of those 5 years means that the wider society is far more intelligent. Therefore, there's a higher IQ within society. Those people are more innovative and adaptive, and that's why you see a lot of developing nations tail behind, because cornerstone of, for me, any society is education. Without education, that society struggles to grow. I'm curious, how are you implementing and developing AI within the day-to-day of your business and your growth strategy?
Yeah, so we look at all the new tools out there and we kind of divide and conquer and come back and go, hey, I tried this, I tried that. This is where it's really good. This is kind of where it's a little clunky or it doesn't meet our needs. It wouldn't really meet a client need. We look at stacking them. We look at, well, how can we really simplify AI tools? I love AI. I think it has immense potential. Like anything else, when it's used incorrectly, it can be weaponized. And I think that's where really we as leadership, right, as company owners need to have that foresight and that thought about, okay, when have we seen something new come in that really changed industries and changed the human experience? And what did we learn from that? Like, what were the downsides of it? And what can we do preemptively to stop that from happening or slow it until we figure out, how to set policies that have structure but aren't stifling to innovation? How do we protect people and privacy and data and, create containers that support mental health, that support education systems and support, global communication that is based in truth, transparency, honor, integrity, and come together and unite, as humans across the globe. Because, growing up, I was that person that I remember when we went to like wireless phones, right? Everything was a cord. You had to go in whatever room, that's where you were. And then we had wires, and then we had cell phones. And, then we had VCRs and we didn't have to go to the movie anymore. We could rent movies and like all of these things, and now we can stream, which is incredible. What does that do? Well, it kind of shifts the field for a few players, right? But humanity as a whole gets better. We're not out there driving our cars in traffic, potentially having an accident, right? We're safe in our homes with our families. But then that also opens up other opportunities for us to come together and build communities, not just locally, but globally.
Mm-hmm. For you, what major shifts and changes are you expecting in the next 12 months throughout your industry?
Oh, yeah. Shifts and changes. We anticipate quite a few. Good, bad, and who's to know at this point where it will fall into. I try personally not to judge and kind of be that grounding force in meetings where it's like, okay, but just what could it be? What's the potential? How can we leverage it in the best way possible? So for me right now, that is, what can we automate and streamline and take workloads off of people to give them more free time, to give them more balance, to allow them to learn something or leave a little early to, volunteer in the community or go home to their children and cook dinner together. Like what can we do? How can we really leverage this in a safe way? And that's the most exciting thing to me. I know personally, I use it all the time. I will have it clean up emails for me. It's like, okay, this is kind of what I want to say, or read this and help me with a response. And I'm not having to spend that creative time responding to emails and text messages. I can spend it in meetings with other people, building things together and throwing ideas out there, or I can spend it with my children.
Spot on. I think that's probably one of the easiest rudimentary ways in how AI is helping people. I think where a lot of us, and I'm criminal of this as well, is especially when you're young, you're full of energy, or you think you are, but you feel that your energy is infinite. But we know in a day we can make X amount of decisions. And that's probably why, and I'm just making this connection right now, but probably why when you're on holiday or you're in the shower, you come up with your best business ideas and thoughts, because your brain is not, you're not sat at this desk and you're having to think of, okay, I'm trying to look at this problem here, but if I take a step back and I'm able to look at it from this lens and this lens, then it's completely different. Or I'm not actively having to think about how to find a solution, then I can take this time to actually think. So when you remove all of these minute details and decisions, and you get an extra perspective from AI within 10 seconds, and it can give you one of the favorite, or one of the best things that I like about AI on a day-to-day basis is having it look at my blind spots, because we all have them, and also allowing it to not directly critique you, but just give you a different school of thought. And that's where I think a lot of I went to business school as well, and that's what I loved about the theory of it. And you look at concepts from Michael Porter and you think, oh, okay, actually this is theory, and then how do you apply it to the real world? Because that's why I think there's a small, if I'm talking about business school here, there's a small disconnect. There's a lot of things that they tell you about, this is how you penetrate the Australian market, and how do you increase chocolate sales of X brand in here, but it's like on a day-to-day tactical level, how does that look as a business owner? Because I don't know about you, but I'm putting out tons of fires every day.
Yes. Yeah, there are fires every day, but I think it really expands our creative capacity, and I will use it. I am probably one of the biggest nerds to ever walk the face of the earth, but people will watch sports or Netflix, and I'm like, let me have a chat with AI. And so it's like, tell me everything you know about game theory, right? Because I want to assess its knowledge. It's like, okay, now I need you to extract that, and I need you to, look at Taylorism. And, now I need you to flip that inside out for me. If I want to completely obliterate that and I want to bring this in, like, what does that look like? What would I need to do? How do I create a movement, based on this new concept? And and we play back and forth with one another. And I lose hours at night, and we'll stay up way past my bedtime and just back and forth. It's like, just play with me. Let's theorize about things. And it's like, okay, now flip that around. Okay, now give me 4 different ways to look at it. Now explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and then I'll ask my children, I'm like, hey, so I was having this conversation, and it said this, this, and this, like, how much does that land with you and your generation? If that were to be a policy, if this were to come into existence? And they're kind of like, I don't know, Mom, maybe that would work, maybe it wouldn't. Have you tried this? And so, children always have some other little golden nugget. I'm like, ooh, no, but I'm gonna pull that chat back up, and I'm gonna feed it this now, and I'm going to see what it tells me. So it's super exciting.
So I'm really curious to learn. I'm an absolute book nerd, and especially around business psychology, economic strategy. Have you got any, what would you pin as your 3 business economics books that anyone should read?
Oh, wow.
Whatever comes to the top of your head.
Yeah. So The Price of Inequality is a good one. The Psychology of Money, A Love Story by Kate Northrup, just because the financial side, she brings a balanced energy to something that's predominantly masculine, how we look at money, create money, invest, build, grow. It's a push instead of a pull. And gosh, there's so many. Hold on.
Can you expand upon that point?
Huh? What?
I'm sure you've got a library behind you, but can you expand upon that point? I haven't heard of that book, but it sounds very interesting.
Oh, Money, A Love Story by Kate Northrup. Yeah. So she actually has quite a large following. It was an interesting way she came into my life a couple of years ago. Now, I was collaborating with a friend who is a female wealth coach, and she only works with women. And we were just kind of talking and building some things, and I was helping her design and kind of tweak a course that she was building. And so we were back and forth and trying things, and I said, hey, this popped up. Have you ever heard of this person? And I said, what I'm seeing, her brand and how she shows up, I really like it. You know, she's on Instagram. And I said, I'm typically not on Instagram, and how this came into my life, I'm not really sure. It was, I think, universal divine wisdom. And she goes, no, that's Kate Northrup. And she told me the whole backstory, and she's like, she's really big. And I thought, oh, okay. And she goes, she's written this book. And so I immediately bought that book, and then her Do Less book, and then started following her and kind of how she launches and markets and how she speaks of it and how inclusive she is. So she leans into feminine energy and mindset without negating the beauty of the male energy and how the two play off of one another. And I think that is one of the most missing ingredients in every textbook I've ever had to study, other business books, the gurus of, the biggest thought leading houses, which will remain nameless, but we know what they are, right? They come from Ivy League institutions. And it's like, that's the secret magic ingredient that's missing, is that magnetism energy, that divine feminine that balances, that really brings out the beauty in things and softens the edges.
I don't want to stop you from pulling in those other books. I'm very keen to hear what else you have as the suggestions.
Oh my goodness, yes. So, purely economics, some of the newer, so Freakonomics, I have to just shout out.
I had that on my head.
The University of Chicago, they have a behavioral economics department that is probably the most near and dear department to my heart. I love them. I love the faculty there. I love everything they produce. I love Freakonomics. They now have a podcast. Have you listened to the Freakonomics podcast?
I'm going to make a note of it here.
It's amazing. I'm always delighted, amazed, amused. It gives me ideas. Some of the stories they've shared, and what they found in their research have brought tears to my eyes. It's like, oh, yes, oof. So, and we'll just stop there. University of Chicago, behavioral economics, Stevens, the two Stevens is what I call them. I adore their work. So
lovely. On my next run, I think I'll binge listen to some of those podcasts. I remember reading SuperFreakonomics. It was one of the first books I really got into. And of all topics, I think it opens up and it speaks about prostitution and how it's the oldest form of business and barter and exchange in history, and how it's deemed as one of the purest forms. It's transaction amongst typically men and women, and men get their ideal outcome, women get their ideal outcome in that context there. And it's a school of thought that it's a bit polarizing at times with people, but the way how they gripped me in the book with that sort of concept, I think it changed my. Prostitution is always quite a negative taboo subject to talk about, but they open up with it and it makes you think, actually, is it good? And why do governments? Why is it seen as illegal? And why do governments tax it? And then if you look at drugs, and there's so many concepts and so many products and services that have been banned, and you think, okay, has this been banned because the powers that are higher up in they can't regulate this and they can't get a hold of it? Maybe. So many.
And that you hit on something really key there. I think that's part of it, and that is one of those things rooted in fear. It's like, how do we control it? How do we put it in container? How do we market it? How do we, make money off of it when it should just be, this is something that is right now in the state of human existence and where we've evolved to. And so instead of fearing it and hating it and judging it, let's understand it. Let's protect the people involved. Let's Let's look at root cause analysis. Let's say, is this something that's good for humanity? Does it meet needs that can't be met elsewhere? Or is this something we should be concerned about? I think, to your point, education, right, and health, and especially women's health, which has systemically been neglected globally. Those are important things that need to be brought up, that are now being brought up more and more. More circles are and more women are going, but what about me? But what about my health? But what about my cycle? What about my emotions? What about my needs, at work, at home, just as a human?
And do you think that's typically because governmental hierarchies in societies have been traditionally run by the majority of men?
Oh, absolutely. And that's not to judge. Men have been great at, with that push energy. Let's push through boundaries. Let's push through the darkness and what we don't know, and let's see and let's figure it out. And that's great. We don't need to contain it. We don't need to shame men for that. We need to celebrate the good parts of it, and harness the good and the beauty in that, and also bring in what women bring to the table to soften those edges, right? To go, ooh, maybe we slow down a little bit right here so we don't jump off that cliff, and let's talk about a better strategy that's more inclusive, where everyone gets their needs met, the man, the woman, children coming up, others, here at home, across the globe, thinking bigger picture and longer term versus short term push, make the win, do the thing.
Yeah, I can feel the narrative amongst a lot of men, and I can feel it myself, even in small examples such as training in the gym. You take this all gas, no brakes mentality, and then what happens, boom, you get hit with an injury, or there's that problem, and you realize actually there's an equilibrium that we need to abide by, and it's kind of thinking of the yin and yang mentality of bringing stuff together. It's something, I don't know, I hope for myself that the older I'm getting, the more mature I'm seeing the perspective of actually faster and bigger is not better.
Correct. But there's a time and space for everything, right? There is a time to push and to grow and to expand and to try and to be messy and not worry about it. And then there's a time to pause and reflect and relax and breathe and look at everything and go, okay, what's really great, and what's not so great. It's like weeding your garden. If you want your roses to be beautiful, you kind of have to cut the ones that aren't so great, to allow those nutrients to help those that have the most potential, that, to bloom and show their beauty. And people are that same way. Organizations, same way. Everyone is a garden. And when we feed and we nourish that garden, when we give it what it needs, when it needs it, it doesn't always need sunlight, right? It needs cooler temperatures. It needs the moon. It needs rain, varying amounts of water, different, minerals and nutrients in the soil. Same with people in the workforce. They need times to try and fail and do things and learn. And then they need some really big goals to go after that really push them, that make them question their knowledge, their abilities, what they think of themselves, their values. We all need those, right? We need that push and that pull.
I'm expecting to see a book on a shelf with your name on it, which is in the realms of philosophy, economics, very, very soon, based on those points. Talking about your business and growth, are you in, I think of business at times in growth and maintain cycles, that similar to what you're saying, it's that balance. You can't always focus on growth, otherwise the machine and the process and mechanics is going to break. Would you say you're more leaning into a growth or a maintain cycle over the next 12 or so months?
The next 12 months are growth for us. It's expanding. We're going to try things. We're going to fail. We're going to learn, and we're going to love every minute of it. It's going to get messy, and we anticipate that. But everything we do, we're going to do wholehearted, with every ounce of love and passion and vigor that we have. We will all play to our unique strengths and come together. And, at the end of 12 months, I think we'll celebrate and kind of rest and take some time and go, okay, what have we learned? And now that, things have shaken out a bit, what direction feels right for all of us?
So and this is a bit of a futuristic question, come summer 2026, what would a few things be that you'd love to celebrate within the team? And I'm sure these are going to change by then.
Well, some of the bigger things probably won't. How it looks or how we get there might. Launch of a podcast, and all of us sharing the best things we've learned, right, along our journeys, and resources that, have helped us throughout our careers and our life. So that one is going to be. We are also looking at creating our own AI bots that help people, kind of coach them through things, so we want them to, instead of, hey, how can I help you? Here's, 5 topics. It's like, what's on your mind today? What keeps you up at night? Okay, based on that, have you considered what would X look like? So I think that's going to take much longer than all of us anticipate to build, but we'll have a clunky version 12 months from now that, and then we'll just keep making it better.
And on the podcast, and obviously a subject and concept that is very fascinating, and I'd love to use the word, when I associate my podcast and just my natural personality, is to being curious. It's fascinating having guests on. Is it more of a podcast where you'll as a team talk about concepts, or will you look to invite guests on?
It's going to be a mix of both. So sometimes it'll be one person leading the charge. Sometimes it'll be a conversation between 2 of us, 4 of us, 5 of us, whoever can jump in and, wants to have that. We'll bring on guests as well, people who are experts in the area of the topics we're talking about. And it's going to, I think, really be fun, especially, when we're talking about 2 ideas that converge, having that kind of the thesis and the antithesis guest, right? So to really highlight the things that people don't see, right? The things that we don't immediately think about when we think about certain topics, or how we think things are or should be. It's like, okay, well, that's one way. But how about these 6 other ways?
So who are a few dream guests you'd love to have on the podcast?
Oh my gosh. Oh, so many.
The Stevens?
Both, of course. That goes without saying. The 2 Stevens, yes. I would love Brene Brown. I would love Kate Northrup to be on there, just to talk about the feminine energy and the money. And there's, there's some, I would love Alyssa Nobriga to come on to that. She's got an amazing, offering that she's built to humanity, based and rooted in her own experiences and where she saw the gaps and a need for people, and a brilliant philosophy and an amazing life that she's led. So those are my top few. I would love to have Dr. Henry Cloud come on. I've been a fan of his work. He's all of his Boundaries series, everything he does, and he's a clinical psychologist, not an IO psychologist, but he consults, for businesses, various industries, and has some really unique perspectives and ideas that he brings to the table, and is really good about harnessing and organizing them into books for people. So,
well, I hope we've manifested this and flown this out into the universe. So the energy is now out in abundance. And with regards to the podcast, when's the ideal date to get it done by, if we want to have this out by next year?
Yeah, so the ideal date would probably be September. So, summertime, a lot of people travel. They're not listening as much. Meetings are harder in the summertime to get people and teams. So kind of that after school starts, kickoff, after Labor Day. I'd like to launch it then.
You'll be surprised because there's tons of people who, when they do go on holiday, they do have that, what we were talking about, that rest time where they consume more content than they think they would, and they're like, wow. And I don't know if you've ever tuned into the High Performance podcast. It's by Jake Humphreys and Professor Damien Hughes. It's a British podcast, but I remember I discovered it during COVID, and I think I got one of the Spotify notifications to tell me you're in the top X% of listeners, and I tuned out for it for a few years, but I was obsessed with it, and it was because I had that free time during summer where I remember just finding it out of nowhere. It was just there. But I imagine, as you mentioned, the fall just after Labor Day period would be a great time, and you can use the time beforehand to build the audience and build the awareness and attraction. And I think you've got an amazing platform there to share insight. And I'm sure once it comes out, well, I'd love to for you to send me a clip and allow me to.
Absolutely. I would love to. And of course, I'd love to have you on too.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much. I'm very humbled on that. Nicole, it's been amazing talking to you. You've already mentioned a little bit of what you've got coming up over the next year or so. Is there anything you'd like to leave with our listeners and viewers?
Yes. In every thought and every decision that you have, if you can take a few moments to just pause and really breathe in and connect with that internal wisdom and that love and that young child that had such passion and vision and wanted to make cool things and do cool things when they got bigger and didn't have to abide by any of those crazy rules, right, from school or parents or society. If you could tap back into that and make an appointment with that person, that younger you, feel that energy and bring that energy forth in your day, I would invite you to do that.
I said that was the last bit, but I've got a question that's just sprung to the top of my head, which has spurted from what you've just said there. If you could go back to only a few years ago to 20-year-old Nicole, what advice would you give her?
Don't play small. Don't cut yourself down to make yourself easy to digest. Just boldly make your mark and stand your ground.
Wonderful. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It has been such a pleasure.
There we go. Marked. Amazing. I'm just going to let it run so it processes everything. Nicole, that was once this comes out, there's a few podcasts that it feels like I'm really leaning into a school of thought that I enjoy and love, and economics and philosophy and everything you stand for is amazing. So thank you for the wisdom.
Oh, thank you for the conversation. I love to find, brothers and sisters out there that are, it's like my tribe. It's we're out there going, really? Is this is the best? Like, can we do better? That curiosity, that passion, that let's just ask questions. Let's just figure things out. Let's just try something new. And I love that about your podcast and you and what you bring to the table and to the world.
Thank you. That is massively kind. And I think what you mentioned about playing big, and we're all big children at the end of the day. And I remember reading a concept from a psychologist, I believe it was, at first when we, and this is something that I think a lot, I'm not a parent yet. How many children do you have?
3.
But they mentioned that at first you idolize your parents, and then you demonize them, and then you humanize them. And I've definitely gone through that journey where I thought, oh, mum and dad are this, and they don't love me, and all of these things that I mean, for most of the part, I think most of us know that our parents unconditionally love us. But I've definitely got to this point where I've been able to see both of my parents and think, wow, you're navigating and you're making up life as much as I am. You're steps ahead of me, yes, but you've still got your childhood traumas, and you've still got your issues and your stresses. And actually, thank you so much for your unconditional love. I've got a brother and sister, so the 3 of us as well. But quite often, putting our needs and desires and our feelings and love above yours. And it's only when you become a true adult where you can look at that and you can say, wow, actually, thank you so much. And you can practice unconditional gratitude.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I've gone through that same journey with my parents. And I think it was like once I became a parent, you go, oh, wow, this is what it's really like. I never anticipated worrying about anything because, when you're young, you're invincible. Like, you don't have to worry about anything. Nothing bad's going to happen. Are you kidding? I can take on the world. And then you become a parent and then you see things happen in spite of people's best efforts, right? To prevent the risk or to prevent the accident or the sickness. And it happens and you're like, ooh, we're not invincible. And your children just want to push those boundaries and want to try things. And you're like, oof, you're going to get hurt, or oof, that's not the best idea. Oof, and you have to, I find myself biting my tongue a lot. And so I have the conversation and I tell them, I'm like, I'm going to put my mom hat on. This is part of my mom job description, that I have to warn you of all the things that could go wrong when you're out with your friends doing what you want to do with them at the lake or camping. And I said, and I just want you to be aware, because I know you're invincible and I know you will heal faster than I will heal if you get broken. But I just need you to promise me that you will keep your eyes open and try to be as safe as possible. And if anything happens, or you even have the sensation that something's going to happen, you call me or someone safe immediately so we can come to your aid. And they're just like, yes, Mom, okay. It's like, okay, so now have fun, stay safe. I love you with all that I am, and send them off, and then just wrap them in protective energy.
I've got my little sister's 11 years younger than me, and I was speaking to my mum recently, and she said, I'm so happy that she can come to you for a bit of an unjudgmental perspective. But I spoke to her before, and naturally she's a teenager, she's only 19, but she's going through just the classic boy drama, and this has happened here. So I know if I get the odd ad hoc call off her, okay, something, and then she'll try and mask it, and she'll say, yeah, everything's good. I'm like, everything fine, and it'll go into a story and stuff. And it was about 2 or 3 months ago, she called me. So she's back in the UK, and I'm here in EST time zone, and 3 o'clock in the morning, so it's 10 o'clock for me, we're speaking, and then about 30 seconds into it, she starts crying. And I always said to her, look, if you've really got a problem, talk to me. I don't want to know your rubbish. I don't want to know your gossip. But if you've got a real problem, talk to me, because in the way I framed it, it's kind of like when you play Monopoly. You've got these get out jail free cards, but there's only a finite amount of them, because you don't want to become the girl who cries wolf, where anything small happens, I can lean on this person. Life is about learning these experiences yourself. But if you're at that tipping point of vulnerability, then it's good to know you've got people there for you. And it's I can only imagine what it's like to get to that stage of being a parent, because you're on that 24/7. Whereas for me, I can dip in and out of it. I'm there, I speak to her every week, 10 days, and that's it. And it's nice for now, but then there's that pressure and the ever constant worry and thought process of you're a parent 24/7. There's no switch off.
Yeah, there isn't. And when things happen, you're just like, oof, okay, well, this is what we're doing. This is like my youngest, Jack, was injured quite bad in his soccer game the very last Saturday of March. So his right tibia was shattered. He was sliding, kicking, the opponent was coming. They both kicked each other, and it shattered his shin guard and, of course, his tibia bone. Luckily, it missed the growth plate, but we've gone through the first surgery of hopefully only 2.
How old is he?
And he's 14. He'll be 15 next month. And, so he was on bed rest for 2 weeks, couldn't go to school. We had to keep his leg elevated, lots of pain, medication, trying to prevent blood clots. It was, and I had to just bite my tongue and go, told you those shin guards weren't enough. Like, we needed a different pair. They needed to be a little bit longer. I had a growth spurt, but I was like, just don't say anything. Just don't say anything. Just love him. Just be grateful it wasn't worse than it was.
That's it.
That we have an amazing surgeon.
It's always one of those cases of, you want to say "I told you so," and it's not now, but it's in a year's time when he's back. And maybe it's the time when you do go to the shop to buy the shin pads, and he looks at them and, do you remember what happened a year ago? And you don't even need to lecture him. It's a case of, he'll see the look and he'll be like, actually, that's enough of the lesson here for me. And I know when I was a teenager, I was a massive idiot, and you'd have things, and you might take all the advice in the world of your mum and dad saying, are you sure you should be doing? Yeah, I'm fine in this. When you actually fall off the bike, or when you do have that injury, then you think, wow, actually what they said was true, and they weren't just saying this to be a mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It wasn't to bring them down, or it's an awareness piece.
That's it. It's the unconditional love that I think a lot of us children, we think it's them just, or you just saying stuff for the sake of it, but it's, at the end of the day, you take the pain before it happens to your children. So,
absolutely.
Nicole, I have a meeting in 4 minutes. I have another podcast.
Yes,
actually.
I do. I have to leave too. Thank you so much for this. It's amazing.
You're most welcome. What I wanted to say is, we actually help with podcast production. If you want, we can look to arrange another call next week or in a few weeks, and I can walk you through a few ideas that we implement and execute, and just even, there's no commitments or whatever, but we can just give you a roadmap as to what we do. And essentially it's looking at how you generate guests on autopilot, how you produce it. And one of the hardest parts with podcasts is actually amplifying the reach. So we can just jump on and I can show you a few things, essentially what I've done with our Grappling Growth podcast. And it's actually something we're piloting. So we're not actually sitting here and saying, oh, we've done this with 10 other people, but we've got tons of lessons and findings. So if there's something of interest, we can jump on another call and see if that's something you'd look to.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that.